A very good evening and welcome to a brand new edition of Face to Face, coming to you direct from our Newsfirst studios in Colombo, bringing you Face to Face. I am Jaimal Ratnayaka for the Newsfirst team. As you are all aware, Face to Face is largely politics related, where we bring political representatives to seek their opinions and their answers with regards to the numerous problems and the hardship faced by Sri Lankans on a daily basis. However, we are also privy to the fact that there are some subjects and topics that must be discussed at Face to Face which concern national level, of national level importance. And one such subject or topic that we decided to speak on today is comedy. They say comedy is simply being funny in a serious way, and comedians, the role of comedians has evolved over time into breaking barriers, to challenging perspectives, and also delivering impactful messages to the masses through being their humorous selves. Comedians need an innate ability and creativity to deliver impactful messages in these humorous tones. And tonight we have a very renowned stand-up comedian in Sri Lanka's comedy scene. She has been in some hot water as of late, but has been released from that as well, which we will delve deeper into throughout the course of the program. She is Nathasha, Edirisooriya, stand-up comedian. Thank you very much for joining me this evening, Nathasha, and welcome on the show.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you very much.
So, Nathasha, I started off my monologue or the program by saying that a comedian needs an innate ability and creativity to write comedy, to be a stand-up comedian, to be able to take serious matters in society and the world and to put it in a very light-hearted manner. So before we get into the serious stuff of our conversation, why don't you tell me and the viewers what your inspiration is to write comedy and how do you come up with your comedy and your verses?
I want to make people laugh, and also almost all of my comedy is informed by my lived experience and sort of whatever I have gone through and my work as well.
Okay.
But at the end of everything, I want to make people laugh, and I think it's very rewarding. It's very rewarding to being able to make people laugh, and I think that's my inspiration is.
Right. So, Nathasha, we know stand-up comedy and comedy as a whole in Sri Lanka is somewhat new to our society, although it has been a large part, or continues to be a large part of open societies, particularly the Western world, where we've had the Trevor Noahs, we've had the Russell Peters, we've had the, even some comedians that are coming up in India. But Sri Lankans are somewhat new to the stand-up comedy scene, and the fraternity around that comedy scene is also new. But at the same time, what I want to ask is, given the issues that you have had to face over the past year or so, more particularly I am referring to the matter where you were charged with creating or allegedly creating religious disharmony during a stand-up gig of yours, do you believe that Sri Lankans are yet to adopt the full principle of stand-up comedy, or do they simply lack a sense of humor?
Just one minor correction.
Yes.
I wasn't charged. They were allegations.
Yes, certainly they were allegations. I agree.
Yes, I actually don't believe it's about the lack of sense of humor in Sri Lankans. I can only talk from the perspective of stand-up comedy. I would say it's because Sri Lanka is very much new to the stand-up comedy scene. People don't understand what stand-up comedy is yet. Audience is still sort of like getting used to what this is. And when that happens, I think audience will evolve and the comedians will evolve as well. It's very much a give and take when it comes to stand-up comedy, because it's not something that you watch through YouTube. It's something that you experience live.
Right.
you go to see a stand-up comedian, and then whenever, like, sort of a stand-up comedian gets energy from the audience, and the audience get energy from the stand-up comedian. It's a very live exchange. So with that, I think Sri Lankan stand-up comedy scene is it's in a really good state right now. I believe it will evolve, and we will see so much more.
Right. So, like I mentioned earlier in my previous question, when you talk about the Western society, particularly the Trevor Noahs, the Hassan Minhaj, Russell Peters, and so on, so many comedians, Dave Chappelle, they have challenged conventional norms, they have criticized politicians, but none of them take any of those comedy-related jokes seriously, because it is, after all, a joke. However, Sri Lankans, regardless of our friendly nature, our hospitable nature, we seem to think, or we seem to take certain things personally, especially if those are close to our hearts or our lives. So do you believe Sri Lankans need to learn to distinguish between taking things too seriously and understanding a context on which a certain joke is made on?
Again, I don't think it's just specific to Sri Lanka, because I remember a year or two ago, Hassan Minhaj was surrounded by a controversy. A New York Times article came out dissecting his comedy special, and then again, like, he in a very empathetic and funny way, he counterattacked that. So it's something that is happening in anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world.
Yes,
and so especially a country like Sri Lanka, a country that goes through a crisis after crisis, I think we need to be able to find humor in things that we experience and reflect on those things. And I think society will evolve to that level, and like I mentioned before as well, it's just in different aspects, in different scales, it does happen all around the world. And I think Sri Lanka is very much new to stand-up comedy, and also for other art forms as well. So it has to start somewhere, because in USA, I think stand-up comedy started in maybe, I'm not sure, but like, it sort of like started to mushroom in 1960s. So now it's 2023 here. So, but it has to start somewhere. But I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful, and we will sort of like evolve, because anyway we do have a very rich culture of art and
forms of expression.
Forms of expression, nadagam and other things. So it's a matter of time and patience and a lot of trials and errors, I believe.
So like you said, there will be a lot of trials and errors, especially when you're a front runner in a certain industry, because it might go right, it might go wrong, you don't know, but you have taken the initiative to grow the Sri Lankan stand-up comedy scene. You have come up with a lot of content that has served to a great extent to the humor and also the well-being of Sri Lankans, because we know Sri Lankans go through uncountable amount of stress given the issues that we are currently facing. However, being that front runner you are, Nathasha, unfortunately you were made to undergo a very bitter experience. And I don't want you to recount any of those events or those experiences, but can you tell me how your life has changed, or your perspective on life has changed with regard to the situation that you underwent, and how that will serve as a potential inspiration in your comedy journey?
I like to say that it made me more stronger and mature, maybe in certain aspects, but that doesn't mean that, it was hard and it was unspeakable as well, because have you ever been to a prison?
No, I haven't.
Have you ever met someone who has been to a prison?
I have, but...
Yeah. So, and labeled as a criminal and sort of like ripped. I was ripped away from my surrounding, my loved ones, and everything that was familiar to me. And I woke up with, I slept with, and I woke up with, I slept next to and woke up next to a person who had murdered her own 2 kids.
I see.
And having to navigate
that turbulent time,
something that, like, people that I'm so foreign to, a system that I'm so foreign to, that I was planted and had no idea why I was there, because I just made a joke.
Yes. You had no intention of creating whatever allegations that were thrown against you.
I mean, and the other thing is learning what my family, my partner went through, and not knowing what I should tell or do to, like, because it's not my fault, but it did happen because of me. They had to go through that because of me, and to this day I don't know what to say to them. I don't know whether I should apologize, but why I should.
We are torn between apologizing and not, because.
And then I'm discharged now, and after a year, and having to live with an active legal case is like, it's like second guessing every single thing you do. Not just second guessing, like it's like 5 times, 4 times.
It weighs heavy on your head.
Yes, and having to live with that, and even the happiest moment in your life, there's like this radio station in your head reminding you have this active legal case. It's just that I don't want anyone to go through that. Anyone, like any person to go through that. And also I think I'm grateful for the support I had. I had a loving, like I had a family that stood by me, and very close friends that stood by me, and my legal team. Just I'm very grateful, and yes, I do believe in 5 years or so, if you ask me the same question, I will be able to say, yes, like, it was this and that, but, and also it's very new. I just got discharged from everything,
from the cases,
and so the past year doesn't go away just because I'm discharged. It's still there, and just it's just I don't even know what to say. It's
a very tough experience to relive.
I don't even.
No, it's fine. It's fine. We understand.
Yes.
So you were talking about the support you received, and there were, so even society, in my personal opinion, as someone who browses social media and is aware of current affairs, there were many factions that were proponents and opponents of this matter, and proponents of this matter, who were on your side, were very vocal that you were simply doing your role or playing your part as a stand-up comedian. So what sort of support did you receive from your support system, from your loved ones and civil society, other members in society? Can you just tell us what sort of support you received during that arduous time?
I believe it's layered. I was in prison, so most of the support I didn't say.
I see.
I think I was in prison for 39 days. So 39 days is a very long time. Last year, this time I was in prison.
Yes.
And so a lot of people had played different roles. It's like, you know, writing legal briefs and also then I don't think I can talk about it. It's so cluttered, like, and but one support one thing that I felt was like people just being there, and giving me a hug, or like just
telling you it will be all right.
Yes, and and the closest circles sort of loving me unconditionally, and just I think it's the love. It's the love. It's
that
the
really
love that
helped you withstand this ordeal.
It's just I'm not able to articulate it. I think it's just a feeling.
Understood.
That because in my very closest circle, nothing changes. I was very much loved, and that
you were received with open arms when you were finally discharged. Understood. So Nathasha, moving towards creating content, especially for stand-up comedy, this whole ruckus came about with regards to you making a certain statement during that comedy program about a certain religious leader. But again, I go back to my statement about open societies and how stand-up comedians are free to articulate and poke fun at religious figures or political figures and whatnot. Do you believe that there has to be a line drawn between culture and religion and humor? And isn't that very difficult to do, especially in the stand-up comedy scene? Or should the audience be more mature and receptive to know that a joke is a joke and it does not extend beyond that?
I believe in an ideal society, people would be able to draw humor from anything they like, but we don't live in an ideal society. But I also believe societies evolve, just like I said earlier. Societies evolve, and humor is a great tool to self-reflect. At least for me, it sort of helps me to laugh at my own self and grow. So with that, I believe it's a process. It's a process, and it will, it's a process.
So let's talk about how you became a stand-up comedian, because when we were having a chat before the program, I heard that you had been overseas and you were in the healthcare sector, you were in the development sector before you finally started to pursue your dream as a stand-up comedian, which is a huge shift from what you were doing at the time. So can you just run us by what you were doing before you became a stand-up comedian, what your life was like, and what made you make that shift, what made you make that switch to being a stand-up comedian?
I think it was a gradual switch anyway. But I was a nurse. I did my bachelor's degree in Australia, and I was a nurse there. I spent, I think, nearly 5 years or so there, and then I felt like I don't want to be a nurse anymore. But I think that nurse in me is still alive. Because I do believe comedy is also a form of healing, and like sort of like helping people laugh. So that nurse is still there. But then after I came back to Sri Lanka, I didn't want to be a nurse. And then I was in the social work sector,
development sector,
sector, and from there I worked as a researcher, and then I did few researches, and that's sort of where I sort of understood like there's a knowledge gap between the academic sphere and the general public. And I was trying to figure out ways to merge that gap, and at that point I was sort of gravitating towards stand-up comedy. I have watched so many stand-up comedy shows, and when I was in Australia, and I
When you returned as well, yeah.
I have gone to USA and Sweden, and I have been to clubs as well. So I was fascinated about stand-up comedy, the way comedians, like, you know, like how free they are on stage, and I was fascinated about it. So I think at that point I was figured out, okay, like I can use stand-up comedy to sort of talk about these issues
prevalent
in a
in the
more
country.
perceptive way that people would be more receptive.
Okay.
And I think that's how I ended up pursuing that. And
here we are.
Here we are.
So no regrets.
I would say no. I mean, being a stand-up comedian, no regrets. I think no.
So what about life ahead? What do you have planned for the months and years to come, Nathasha? Academically, career-wise, whatnot?
I was anyway planning for my MA, my Masters.
Yes.
But unfortunately, last year when I got an email from the university, I was in prison. I couldn't. I missed some correspondence.
Yourself, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like after I got released, I made connections, and so I got in, and I got the Shivning scholarship as well.
I see. Congratulations.
Thank you. So that's the academic angle. And I want to pursue that and it's storytelling as well, because I'm very intrigued about the storytelling, because at the end of everything, we are the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we tell others.
Yes, true.
I mean, it's marketing or like culture.
Effective communication.
Yeah, everything is stories. Like if you had read Sapiens by Harari, it says like civilizations is built on gossips. Gossips are stories. So it's sort of like that is something I'm very fascinated about.
But we don't endorse gossip here. we based ourselves on factual things. Just pointing it out. Anyways, yes.
So I'm very fascinated about storytelling and humor as well, and I want to
learn the nitty-gritty of that.
Yes, and to see where it takes me.
So as a career stand-up comedian, what is next in line for Nathasha?
I'm planning to do a show in September.
Okay. Is that going to be your first show since being released?
Not really, actually. I did 2 shows in January.
Okay.
But it was
behind closed doors.
Yeah, family and friends. Right. But this one is open to
the public. Okay.
Very excited about that. And yes, because I believe like comedy is something. I believe any art piece is like a timestamp of someone who creates the art.
Yes.
So even in my life, like. I look at my art pieces and like sort of wow, okay, you know,
and it's unique to you.
Yes, and also I evolve as well. Yeah.
So finally, Nathasha, pressed for time. However, I must ask you this: if there are any aspiring comedians, someone who wants to be a stand-up comedian in their life, we know when it comes to Sri Lankan society, unless you're a doctor or an engineer. It doesn't really make the cut, and if you say you want to be a stand-up comedian, people will be astonished. But there are people like you who have made that leap and who are very satisfied with the decisions you've made. So if there is anyone who wants to do something unorthodox in their life, with their lives, as a career, as a profession, what is your message to them?
I think whatever you do in your life, you have to face the consequences as well. You have to take the accountability. I actually believe everyone should be able to live the life they want to live. They should have the freedom to live the life they want. So, I mean, I don't want to give. Do I want to have to give advice?
Yes. No, I mean
like
share your experience.
I think it's just do whatever you want and take accountability for that, and like grow and evolve and just live a life, and like it's your life, it's your journey, and go through with it. It's just it's fun.
Right. So Nathasha, living in a country like Sri Lanka, following a profession of being a stand-up comedian, that requires a lot of freedom of expression. And we know in Sri Lanka historically, freedom of expression has every now and then been curtailed. Let's face it, regardless of who says what. We know freedom of expression is not 100% allowed in Sri Lanka. It applies to the masses, trade unions, the media. There are every now and then attempts being made to curtail the freedom of expression of the people as well. Being a stand-up comedian who is at the forefront of expressing what she feels, do you believe comedians truly have freedom of expression here in Sri Lanka?
Okay, I'm a comedian. I made a joke. I was in jail. I was discharged. Do your math.
But at the same time, will you still continue to express your thoughts in the most raw form that you want? Or will you, when you're penning down something, will you second guess what you're doing here on?
I think stand-up comedy is about making people laugh. It's not about like making controversy. It's about making people laugh. So it's about creativity as well. So how creative I am to get my point across, and how smart I am to
navigate those tricky
that.
waters.
So I think it's a fun journey that anyone has to learn. So I think it's not about whether I would say it raw. It's about whether I would say the same thing, how I would say it.
Quite an interesting and rather unorthodox conversation with stand-up comedian, very renowned stand-up comedian Nathasha Edirisooriya this evening on Face to Face. Unfortunately, we're running out of time for the show, but thank you very much, Nathasha, for joining us on Face to Face and sharing your very candid views on all things comedy, personal, and also if you have a dream, follow it regardless of what and where you are at the moment. Unfortunately, that is all for tonight. However, because we've been talking about comedy, I will leave you tonight with a quote. It says, "The duty of comedy is to correct men by amusing them." Thank you very much for stopping by. Take care and good night.